everybody. I hope you're having a great start to your week. This is the third week of Advent, and I'm continuing the series on how to illuminate your life in practical ways through the study of preparing your heart and your mind for the coming of Christ, even if your life happens to be dark, and really especially if your life is experiencing great darkness. This week I want to focus on illuminating your life with love. A lot of people now are feeling this intense loneliness. We are more connected online than ever in history, and yet we have never been so isolated. The connections that we experience in the internet and on our social media are not the same as those in-person hugs and that genuine revealing of what's in your heart and what your needs are, and praying for and over one another in person has a different impact on the soul and on the heart. And so because we've withdrawn within our homes, we are feeling more lonely and disconnected than ever before. And so this concept of love being part of Christmas feels very foreign, and it feels very awkward for a lot of people. And it also feels like something that people don't even know how to do in their lives, and they don't know how to express it or experience it or demonstrate it around them. And yet the thing is, we have become so fearful that fear is the opposite of love. And when we have that going on in our lives, it is very difficult to share love with those around us in the world. Yet it has never been more or less important, because that's why Jesus came. Jesus came as love incarnate, wrapped in the swaddling cloths that would have swaddled a sacrificial lamb, and placed in a manger to feed a starving world with the love of God. And that's what we are called to be. When we receive this love from Christ, when we open our hearts and we receive the love of God, it fills us and overflows from us, and the Spirit compels us and urges us to become more like Christ, to become that love laid out, to share our hearts as the very thing that the world around us hungers for most. That thing that Christ gives us, that love of Christmas, is what we carry when we have Christ within us, and it's what the world is starving for. And when we isolate, we feel like our love is growing cold because we are not sharing as a vessel, as a viaduct of that love that we are meant to be. So we stagnate as Christians, as carriers of the love of Christ, if we don't share it. We are called to become like Christ, who went out and just completely poured himself out on the world, knowing full well the world is brutal, the world is violent, the world can be cold, but this starving world is the world that most needs us to share his love. And so what are some ways that we can resist the temptation to become part of that fear-mongering message of the world? Oh, the world's love has gone cold, and this is the end of the world, and everything's bad, and we should all hide in our houses. And instead embrace that message and that prompt of Christ in our hearts. No, we need to instead be out there. We need to instead risk ourselves the way Christ risked himself, and be out there despite, not just despite actually, but because of the brutality and the cruelty and the violence and the anger and the bitterness of the world. We need to be out in the world sharing that light all the more, not hiding, not afraid. Because even when Jesus gave the prophecy in Matthew 24 about, oh, the end of times is going to be bad, the love of most will grow cold, you'll hear wars and rumors of wars, two messages often get lost in that prophecy of the end times that Jesus, that Christ of Christmas, brought to us about the world growing cold in the end times. He said specifically at the very beginning, you're going to hear this, but do not be alarmed, he said. He said, do not be alarmed. And he also said that he was going to be with us in this. He promised us that he would be with us. So we're not to be alarmed about the world, because we have God to anchor our soul. He's providing us with all the love that we need. We're not going to run out. As long as we stay connected to him as we're pouring out, we can't run out. And that's why Jesus was not afraid to pour himself out. He knew who was more important than the what. If we focus on the what of our circumstances, we'll easily get afraid. But instead, we need to center our hearts and our souls upon the ultimate who gives us all the love that we'll ever need, all the resources that we'll ever need to pour the love of Christ out from the soul that He is supplying. And with an overflowing abundance of love, the more we pour out, the more He provides for us. And we will find in that process that instead of being diminished, we're having more reason to fear from becoming who Christ wants us to be, emulating Himself. We are actually more full than ever before. It's the strange economy of God. He gives us more the more we pour out. He fulfills us the more we expend the resources He gives us. So you will never be more full than when you are giving out in the name of Christ. So this Christmas, instead of hiding in fear, go out there and be the love of Christ. And there are some ways that we can do this. We can listen actively to people. Don't just say, "How you doing?" Because that tone of voice, the body language, suggests that you're expecting that standard pat response. Everybody knows what that is. F-I-N-E, fine. It's fake. It doesn't mean anything. And that's what people are conditioned to respond with. But if you stop and slow down and you open your heart and listen actively and really spend time with somebody, put your hand on their shoulder and say, "How are you really doing right now? Is there something I can pray for you about?" Invite people to really share with you how they're doing, not just fine. And that kind of body language, that leaning forward, tilting your head, being prepared to listen, slowing your voice down, and looking them in the eye like you care. That invites people to share. And you would be surprised how much strangers are willing to share, because people are dying to be heard. We're so alone. I have had one time a butcher that I didn't even know and never saw again came out from behind the counter and shared with me all the stuff that was going on in her life, invited me to stand there right in the middle of the grocery store and pray with her, because no one had taken the time in her life to just listen to her and to care about her. People are starving for others to care for them right now. And you can share this. This is a gift that you can give that not only does it not cost you anything, but it will bless you beyond all measure, more than you expect. You will be more enriched by giving away your time, your active listening, your true, genuine compassion and empathy to those around you. So take time with people you know and people you don't know. Even if they're strangers, you can take a moment and say, "How are you doing? You look tired. Are you okay?" People need to be cared for. And if there's no one in their life and you just happen to be there, that's not a coincidence. That's a God incidence. And it's an opportunity for you to be blessed as that person's listener, that person who was there when they needed someone to be there and didn't have anyone else to be there. So smile when people are struggling, when they're doing things wrong, when they're stumbling through traffic. This is a busy time. People need extra grace. Take the time to smile at them and say, "That's okay. It's okay." Give people a little grace. It doesn't really cost you that much more time to show grace and to smile at people when their children are being noisy in church, or if somebody's kids are acting up and they're apologizing. Just smile and say they're adorable. It's okay. Show grace with people and smile and be genuine and care about people who really need extra grace right now. A lot of people do. You can be that. You can offer them something that they might not get anywhere else. And when someone's sad, show genuine empathy. You can frown with them. There's times to smile. There's times to frown. Really show that you care and look people in the eye and take the time to listen. And if someone asks you to pray for them, the best thing to do is to pray with them right there if possible. It's not always possible, but sometimes you can. You can just take a moment and say, "Let me just pray for you about that right now," because otherwise you could forget later, and you don't want to risk promising to do it and then forgetting to do it. So either pray with them right then, or make sure you make a note so you don't forget, because that's a tremendous responsibility to offer to pray for somebody. So if you promise, make sure you follow through and do it, and then make sure you follow up. If someone has shared something that's a concern, always come back to them and say, "How's your mother doing? How's your family doing? Always follow through on the things that people share with you that are concerns or problems in their life, and show that you care. It doesn't cost you anything to genuinely take the time to follow up with people and care for them. And it means so much in a world that has grown very cold, to be someone who can be the warmth and light in the midst of that chilly environment that we often experience day to day. So also take the time for those who are kind of isolated, people who are in the hospital, people who are grieving, even if this death that they experienced in their lives was a year ago, a year and a half ago. Remember that if it was their spouse or their child or somebody in their household or their parent or someone they were caring for, they're still grieving this holiday season. So take the time to really check with those people and see how they're doing, and let them know that you're still thinking about them and that you're caring about what's going on with them. So check on them, check on people who are financially struggling, check on people who've lost jobs, people who've had, we've had a lot of natural disasters that happen in our country. So check up on the people that you happen to know were suffering during these times and seasons in the past year. They're still going to be feeling the aftermath of all of those things at Christmas, and it makes Christmas very hard. So just knowing that people care enough to ask how they're doing is important. It makes them feel like they matter, and they do matter, and we should help people to understand how much they matter. And take the time, just an hour of your time somewhere in the holiday season, to volunteer to feed the hungry, or pray with those who are outcasts, or go visit someone who's in the hospital, or just call on people who are the least, the last, the lost. Those are the people that Jesus primarily came to when he was born onto this starving, chilling, brutal earth as the most vulnerable form imaginable, a little baby wrapped in nothing but rags. That's what Christ came to the earth for. He came to minister to those who were in the most brutal circumstances under the most horrifically violent king, Herod, that you can imagine. We wonder if our world is more violent than ever. What could be more violent than being ruled by a king who killed all of his children and then proceeded to kill all of the toddlers and babies in his own country? We don't even have anything to compare that to in our current world. We have a lot of violence, but it's not as though this is the only time in history violence has ever happened. Christ came at a time of violence and brutality and cruelty. So he understands the human experience of betrayal and cruelty and violence and horrible, horrible cultural circumstances. He is with us in these times, and that is something to remember and something to embrace others with. Emmanuel is the message of Christmas. God with us in the midst of the cold, harsh brutality of the world means that we are not necessarily shaken by the horrible circumstances around us. We can base our security and our joy and our peace and our well-being and our emotional sense of who we are on a who instead of all the what's around us. And so another key way that we can share is to actually touch people. We have grown so avert, we've got so many aversions, so averse is what I meant to say, to touching people in our culture now. And of course you want to be appropriate in the way you touch people, but we can still appropriately, friendly, in friendship, hug people and take hold of someone's hands, put a hand on someone's shoulder. It's still possible to do those things without being inappropriate, but it's important to do those things because we are meant to be in contact with other people and share through the laying on of our hands the love of God among other people. So some people are starving from love because they are never actually touched by another human being. There's something innately required of the human soul to have human contact with another human being, physically touching them. So that is very important, that we don't abuse that privilege, but that we use it in the way that it was meant to be used. So what are some other ways? I would love to hear you. Just hop on divineencouragement.com and share on my blog post today about the ways that you love to share love, the way that you would be that light of Christ and become that self-sacrificing person that shares that glow in the world around you that has become so very dark and cold. So I look forward to hearing your comments, and I'm so thankful for all of you that joined today. I pray that you will experience love in a radical and brilliant way this Christmas season. Have a blessed week and Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.